Hi, everyone. Do you know the number one thing that you have to change if you want to make long-term changes, whether that's a change in your personal life, like drop some weight, change your eating behavior, get in great shape, whatever it happens to be in your like physical personal life? What about your other personal life, like your relationships with other people, maybe your relationship at work, all those kind of things? And what about your business life? You want to create a different business, build your business differently, or if you're working for someone else, to leverage what you do there in a better way. So what's the number one thing you need to change? Well, it's one of the very basic things that you have that you're always working with, and that's your identity, who you really are. Who are you? And we need to alter that if we want to make long-term changes. I speak about that because when I've seen people make long-term changes in different parts of their lives, usually one of the things that drastically shifts is their identity, who they think of themselves as being. As a lot of people know, I come from the world of addictions, being an alcohol and drug counselor for way over 30 years, besides being a psychologist and an NLP and hypnosis trainer. But when I see people really change their very nature, so they totally overcome the drugs and the alcohol, they're totally recovered, they don't want to go back. Well, they've altered their identity. It's no longer part of who they are. So their identity shifts. When they think about themselves, who they used to be isn't who they are now. And there's this fundamental shift. Now, what's interesting when you think about this, a lot of times motivational speakers, sometimes even psychologists, I read things online, and sometimes they act like it's a very simple thing to shift your identity. But to shift your identity, there's a matrix, if you will, of things that have to shift to support the new change. And if all of these things aren't in alignment when we're beginning to make this change, it's never going to work, right? And that's what we talk about, is a different way to approach it. So if you study how people really alter their identity, who they are when no one's looking, as I would say, because the reason you have to shift your identity, that identity is what drives everything that you do. First of all, it sets your standards. What will you accept? And what is just a part of you? If someone that's a person that just exercises not constantly, but they always exercise, right? I mean, they go on vacation, they still exercise, right? They could be at a conference, they're going to find a place or a way to exercise. It's part of who they are. That means it's part of their identity. It's not just something that they do. It's not just a behavior. It is part of who they are. I see this, especially in the self-help world. A lot of people talk about this, and yet they don't do it themselves, right? They'll talk about, they need to exercise. Well, but you really can't exercise when you're at a conference or on a cruise or wherever it happens to be. I don't know. I think you can, right? But that's part of my identity. It's not part of everybody's. You can make it part of your identity. There's some steps you can take. And that's the problem. You see, to really change your identity, it takes some steps, including some painful steps to look at who you are, the way you think, the way you believe, the way you behave. So over the next few days, I'm going to be posting these videos about changing your identity and the things you need to do to change your identity, right? Well, what supports your identity? It's easy to say, in the NLP world, we use a methodology called the logical levels, that you have your identity is at the top, who you are. And then underneath that would be your beliefs, right? Does your belief support your identity? Do you believe something is true? Sometimes what you believe is based in your identity. If you're a very religious person of a certain sect, if that's part of your identity, then of course that's part of your beliefs. If people looking from the outside go, that may or may not make sense to them, but it's not part of their identity. So your identities will support your beliefs. And one of the things that begin to happen, what happens when you get a belief shift that clashes with your identity? This is, again, to link it back to, let's say addictions, or when I've worked with people that have like I would almost say a food addiction. They not just obese, they just, nothing would help them. And what happened was that was part of their identity. This is who I am. I'm a drinker, I'm a partier, I'm a foodie, right? Well, then they get to their belief says they can't change. I can. To speak on addiction again, I've been through treatment. I've gone to AA. I've gone to therapists. I just can't change, right? That's part of their identity. Well, if things start to crack that belief, they see other people change, right? That said they couldn't change, but they change. Well, then you get a little bit of a clash inside with the beliefs. Can I change? Can I not change? Right? And really, it gets down to like, you know, that part of you wants to change, part of you doesn't. Some people call it cognitive dissonance. You have conflicting beliefs, right? And again, this goes back to your identity. Your identity will default subconsciously, unless you're doing some very specific steps to change it, your identity will default your belief set. So if you have the choice of drinking, not drinking, if you believe you're a drinker, you're going to drink. You have to begin to change that. Now, there's some shortcuts around it, and there's some things you can do to begin to do it, right? But first of all, you have your identity, then you have your beliefs, right? And then what supports your beliefs sometimes is your skill set. Do you know how not to drink? Do you know how to go out and have a good time without drinking? You know, in the addiction world, it's not unusual. People's biggest fear about stopping drinking or getting high or getting rid of the food is, I'll never have fun again, right? Which, really? But if that's a belief, which may be supported by their identity, right? So they have to get the skill of not drinking. They have to get the skill of saying no, thank you. They have to get the skill of going out and having a good time and not having a drink, right? Whatever it happens to be, right? And again, now we default back to the beliefs. The beliefs will support the skill or say this won't work for me, right? And then some of the beliefs that we get, by the way, are installed by society, right? Or they become like, that's where the term intergenerational beliefs begin to happen, you know. In my culture, we eat a lot of potatoes, or in my culture, we eat a lot of pasta, or in my culture, we do this. Then you're taking that culture as part of your identity. Does that make sense? So you may have to shift several things or things within it, say of your identity, your beliefs. And so we'll be talking about these things, your skills, you know, and then what about your behaviors, right? Your behaviors will line up with your identity, right? And then you have your environment. So all of these levels are what you begin to have to change if you really want to make long-term change. And that's why, you know, in the current world, as I'm recording this, people want shortcuts, they want hacks, they want a fast way, you know. I mean, if you look at the medical model, I mean, my friends that are medical doctors say one of the biggest problems is people want a pill, so they give them a script. Let's say they have an infection. I think the current statistics, like 70% of the people never take all the pills that were prescribed, you know, or they don't take the pills that they need to take, right? Yeah, if you're doing the medical model. So, I mean, you have to have the behaviors, right? And so where does this begin to change? Then the last would be your environment. But each one of these will either support you making this change or hinder you making this change. So what's a change you need to make? Or what's a change you want to make, right? And again, need will not necessarily help you change. It's not unusual that, you know, when you're strapped to a gurney with an IV dripping in your arm, you know, because you let your health go to the wayside, right? And so you'll say, I'll do everything I need to do to change. I'm going to quit eating junk food. I'm going to start exercising. I'm going to drink more water, da, 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 da. And, you know, 3 days out of the hospital, they're going to McDonald's, you know, getting a double quarter pounder with big fries and a Coca-Cola. And then, you know, once the emergency's off, right? So need will not help you change. I need to change my business. Are you willing to take the steps you have to do to change your business? Lately, I've been helping hypnotists, coaches, NLPers, and become entrepreneurs. You know, just because you run a practice doesn't make you an entrepreneur, right? An entrepreneur is a person that works on their business, not in their business. It's a fine line, right? But anyway, I help people do that. And the biggest thing they have to shift is their identity. You know, oh, doc, I'm really good at like coaching people or helping people lose weight or stop smoking, whatever, improve their sports game, but I'm not a salesperson. Well, that's part of their identity. We need to install that as part of their identity, right? And so there's all these, it's like a matrix that you have to begin to change, right? And a major change in any one of these levels may ripple through and change everything. But if you want it to be ongoing, not just short term, right? It has to become part of your identity, right? And people go, well, if you just do a behavior for 21 days, that's a big myth. You do a behavior for like somewhere around 21 days, some of the research says like over 100 days, then it'll become part of you. of who you are. Is that necessarily true? I don't know. Is it? Have you ever seen somebody do something for a long period of time and then they just stop doing it? I've seen it all the time. I use the analogy of some person, young man or woman, goes in the military and spends 4 to 6 years and they're in great physical shape. Let's say they become a Marine, right? So for that 4 to 6 years, every day they're working out, they're doing PT, they're strapped, right? And they dress great, their uniforms are squared away. They're looking great. And they do that every day. They live that way for 4 to 6 years. And then they get out, right? And you run into them 2 years later and you're like, what happened to that in shape, put together young Marine, man or woman? Now that, they put on a lot of weight, they haven't exercised since the day they got, ETS, in time and service, as it said. They got out of the military. Even though they did it for several hundred days, it didn't become part of their identity, right? And then, of course, we get other people on the flip side that it's just part of their identity. It stays with them. They work out regardless of where they are or what's going on, right? So there's ways to do this, and that's what I help people do. So if you like these kind of videos, make sure you click like, subscribe, and leave a comment and let people know about these videos, because that's my goal, is to help people make these changes, and over the next few days, we're going to be talking more about some of the things you have to shift. And we'll come back to identity after we talk about the other levels, because it's not just as easy as like putting on a new shirt or putting on a different mask. People said, just put on a different mask. Well, that's a part that you play. That doesn't become part of your identity, right? If that was true, then, an actor that plays a certain character for a long period of time in a TV show or a series of movies, does that become part of who they are? Knowing many actors that have done roles for a long, long time, no, right? That's one approach. You could put the mask on and think about it differently, right? But the way your brain works is marvelous. It's magical if you know the techniques to make the changes long term. That's what we'll be talking about. So again, if you like this, click like and share. Make sure you subscribe to this channel wherever you happen to see it, YouTube, Instagram, wherever it happens to be. Make sure you subscribe, let other people know that it's there, and help people make the changes that they want, that they need, and that they desire. So it's my joy to bring you this stuff, and I look forward to helping you in the future. Again, I'm Dr. Will Horton, and you can always contact me through drwillhorton.com or shoot me a direct message, leave a comment, and I'll get back to you. Have a great day.